Hi guys, and welcome to another Brushmaster video. We're going to be painting this wonderful character from Raging Heroes today. I've got an early version of him and he is called the Architect, but he's a very cool model and he's going to be good fun to paint. So I undercoated him black and then I've done a spray from above with medium rust, and from underneath and the back this is star blue. Not very heavy, quite thin down so that we see a lot of the black showing through. Now a lot of this model is bones and bandages. So what I'm going to do to start with is I've mixed up quite a heavy wash. It's quite heavy, but this brown, mud brown and tan yellow. And what we're going to do is we're going to paint all the areas that are either bone or these wrappings in this wash. So we're going to be quite liberal with this, so not going to be shy. But obviously when this dries, because it's quite thin, we just want this to run in the gaps and all the little crevices. This is going to dry obviously a lot darker. This wash is fairly thin, but we're just trying to give like an undercolor here, a tone if you like. And then we can just highlight on top of it, and it's going to be quite quick and fairly easy to do all these bones and wrappings. As you can see, I'm letting this paint run in a lot of the crevices and all the little nooks and crannies. I'm not worried about that so much because you just got to pop all the little air bubbles you get. So we want to see this colour being on there, but like I said, we very much want to see those undercolours still sort of showing through. This is it's sort of like underpainting in a way. We've sort of done underpainting with the blue and the rust colour, but now we're adding a bit more tone to our underpainting. As you can see, this will dry up fairly dark, so we won't see a lot of this, but there'll be enough in there to give us that tone that we want. Okay guys, so all that wash and whatever we want to call it is dried. You could have done that with sort of contrast paints or speed paints too, but I quite like mixing my own. So we're going to tackle the bone first, and what I've done is I've introduced buff into my palette now, and I've mixed buff with a bit of the tan yellow we had because I want the bones to be brighter than these rags and bandages. So we're going to start here and just try and highlight some of these parts of the bone just so that we can get him to stand out a bit. We're not going to worry too much about blending and stuff at the moment. We just want to get some good coverage of this nice light tone. Just in the prominent areas, the bits that stand out the most are going to be in where our light source is going to show. Okay guys, so I got the rest of that all done. So it looks a bit dull now, so we need to add some brighter highlights now. So I'm going to go straight in with buff this time, and we're just going to add some little spots of light which will make this bone pop out a bit more for us. So we're just adding very small bits of this. I'm trying to pick out these little tiny teeth at the same time. Now it starts to look like it's got a bit more contrast now. Okay guys, so I've gone and finished up that bone now, and all I'm going to do now is I've mixed up a glaze of the buff colour that we've just used, and this is of sort of this consistency. If you can see, there's not very much paint in there at all, and I'm going to wick most of that off on a paper towel each time I load the brush, and we're just going to use that just to smooth some of these little areas out. Just where there's some brush lines showing from the base coat, etc. Just a couple of little places. And on a miniature this size, you don't worry too much, especially on bone. It's going to be a sort of object that's going to be sort of rough anyway. But it's nice just to smooth a couple of little bits out. Especially the more prominent bits that are going to stand out on the model. But this step is not 100% necessary when you're painting. It's just something that I like to do. Alright, and that'll do it. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and start painting these wrappings and bandages now. So I want these to look a little bit darker with just some extremely sort of bright little highlights on some of the edges. Because we want this to be different to the bone, and it's a very similar sort of colour. So we want to keep that darkness in there. So I'm going to go with the mud brown again with a little bit of buff added in, and we'll start highlighting up with this. But we want to be conscious here to try and leave as much of this darker undertone that we've got in place as possible. And we'll try as we go along with lighter layers. We'll try to put some scratches and nicks in this just to make it look a bit more worn. And some of the tops of these bandages, like especially on the very small ones you're going to see on the arms, we'll probably just, paint those in big blocks rather than picking out the individual wraps, because they're so very small that it's going to be almost impossible to paint them individually. And I'm looking at them now. I think we may even do like a dark wash or glaze over them afterwards as well, because I feel like the shadow parts on these are not going to be dark enough for what we want. So we may put this layer and one more highlight on, and then I'll possibly add a much darker wash over them, just to try and reinforce those darker areas. Because what I'm worried about at the moment is they're going to look too similar to the bone areas. Okay, I've got most of those blocked in now. So what I'm going to do at first here, we're just going to do an extreme highlight with tan yellow. Just going to see what that looks like, because I've got a feeling I might have to put a wash over this as well. But we'll see what this looks like. As you can see here, I'm got this quite thin, this paint, and we're going to put some little scratches just to make it look a little bit worn, and it'll help to make it stand out a bit from the smoother bone that we've got. No, I think they're actually going to look okay. Okay, to finish off the highlights, I'm just going to go with pure buff now. So I just really want just a few little tiny spots, because if we overdo this, it's going to look too much like the bone. As you see here, I'm just trying to get the very tops of some of these pieces. And just give them a little bit, just a little bit more definition in a couple of parts. So for the last stage, I've mixed up a little bit of chocolate and a little bit of star blue. This actually makes a really dirty, muddy green, which is a beautiful colour. And we've added a little bit of black to that. And I just want to add some tiny bits of this dark tone in a couple of places. And you'll see where I'm going to go here. And this really is just to separate out some of these bandages and just add a little bit more contrast in a couple of spots. So yeah, now we can start to see a little bit more definition. Right, and the last step now is I'm going to use the same colour, and I've thinned it right down to a glaze, and we're just going to try and add some little darker parts in, just onto some of the shadowy parts. And just give a little bit more contrast in a couple of places. And when we put these glazes on, you can see here what I do is I'll glaze an area and then I'll leave it alone. I'll go somewhere else, glaze a bit in another area, and this honestly, it dries so fast. Then we can go back, now it's already dry, and then we can add more layers if we need them. So now we're getting a little bit more of the darker tones in the bottom areas, especially of some of these bandages or wrappings, whatever we want to call them. Right, and I think that's going to do us there. So that's the bones, and we might just add a little bit under here. Like